All right, guys, welcome back to Of Stone and Clay podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Church. This is episode 82. We are here with Logan Petersen. Thanks for coming on, bro.
Yeah, of course, man.
Logan Petersen, he is the co-host of Dad Bods Beards. How long have you guys been doing that now? A couple of years?
We just hit a year.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So
what was, so I know you guys talk a lot about, I mean, obviously, if you're just listening, you're not watching, Logan has like a 13-inch beard, much to the chagrin of your wife, I've heard.
Yeah, she likes me with a beard, but just not this long. But it kind of comes with the whole like Dad Bods and Beards, and like the beard care company.
How much does she like your dad bod? Does that
she met me?
If you start like slimming down, is she gonna get upset?
So she met me with a dad bod.
Okay.
So we're good there. Yeah. No, we're working on it. I've actually been going to the gym at like 4 a.m. Because a neighbor has been pushing me, which has been really good. But like, that's a whole different mentality of people that are there. Like,
the 4 o'clockers.
Yeah, the 4 a.m. like 4 a.m. club is just, but it's cool. I mean, 6 a.m. comes and you're like, I'm done and I'm awake. But
and come 8 p.m. you're ready for bed.
Yeah, so it's, I guess, job security, like the dad bod and the beard, they kind of have to stay a little bit, right?
Yeah. Okay, so your podcast, you guys talk a lot about mental health, fatherhood, and the Dad Bods and Beards. It's kind of, my assumption is it's kind of trying to say like, these typically very manly men that maybe don't feel comfortable talking about those sort of things. You guys are trying to kind of squash that stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, you grew up similar eras, right? Like it was just like, oh, suck it up, rub some dirt in it. Like, and I feel like the 80s, 90s, early 2000 kids that are all grown into, like, we're all adults now, like 30s, 40s, 20s. Like it's just too common. We're realizing that the suicide rate among men is so ridiculously high. And it's because they're just silent. They don't talk about their feelings and they feel like they can't. And it just, the stigma behind weakness is associated with men talking about their feelings or the thing they struggle with just has to end, because in my own personal experience, I've found the exact opposite to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you grow up with like your friend groups, the culture being very much like just kind of making fun of each other all the time?
Oh yeah, dude. I was a 90s
balls.
kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was born 89. So I grew up like disappeared after school, came back at dinner time, like on the weekends, like we were non-existent at home. Like, and you just made fun of each other. You joked with each other. And I think, there was like a level of which, I guess, I don't know, you kind of smooth the edges out a little bit. You don't take things as harshly, I think, as an adult. But at the same time, like you didn't really talk about, the heavy stuff. Like I found out, from my friend since he was 4 years old, I didn't find out till we were adults something that he'd been struggling with forever. Yeah. Because you just didn't talk about it.
Right. Was your family the kind of family that was pretty closed off, or were you guys pretty open and communicative?
So I'm one of 7 kids, and we didn't really talk about like the deep emotional stuff. Yeah. Right. I feel like that was pretty typical for like the 90s, right? Yeah. And we just didn't really, I think at that time it was more like pretty common, like temporal needs, right? It was 7 kids and my dad traveled a lot for work. It was like, did you eat today?
Right. Yeah.
Like
we don't have time for
we got 6 out of 7. Like it's still, we're still good, but we didn't talk a whole lot with like getting into the emotions. And that's not necessarily like a slam on my parents. I think it was just the time, right?
Yeah. And I think, looking at my family and our dynamic, like my parents were a lot better than their parents.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so it's just kind of this evolution. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I've listened to a few of your episodes, and you talk a lot about your kind of journey with bipolar disorder. When did that first kind of make itself manifest?
So that's an interesting question, because I think when it first manifested versus when I like noticed it /
diagnosed,
accepted it, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't diagnosed till I was 27.
Okay.
But with the knowledge and everything that I had, I've had in the years since then, I realized my first like manic episode happened when I was 20.
Okay.
And I was more on like the hallucinogenic side.
Oh,
like I had some.
Aren't there 2 types?
Yeah. So there's bipolar 1 and there's bipolar 2. I feel terrible as far as like being a mental health advocate, because it's like I always mix those two up.
Yeah.
But essentially one is more depressive,
Mm-hmm.
and then one is more you experience mania along with depression and other other symptoms kind of mixed in there. But yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 27 after some pretty extremely rough years, like rough on my wife,
Mm-hmm.
rough on myself a lot. And I'm 34 now, so it's been a good chunk of years since then. But the first ever like thing that as far as I can think back, because there's blackout periods like with mania, it's pretty rough. I had a full like hallucinogenic trip when I was on a mission,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw things that weren't there.
Yeah.
And it was, telling me the worst parts about myself. And, it's weird. I've said that your mind, like one thing I've learned in this whole experience is that the human brain is capable of unbelievable things, like what it can like make you think is real that's not. So yeah, it's been a trip.
So before maybe those more intense episodes of mania and stuff, did you struggle with depression?
Yeah, so I've always been a pretty animated guy.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my parents have told me that growing up and stuff. But there was kind of a switch, I guess, in my later teen years where I started experiencing more anger and more like short fused mentality, which that's not that crazy for kids getting experiencing testosterone for the first times and things like that. But yeah, I started losing interest in like a lot of stuff that I wouldn't say that necessarily I experienced like deep depression as a teenager, but I definitely like lost interest and barely passed senior year of high school. I mean, that's common, but it's because I had, like I said, I've said it 5 times, I had no interest in school. And I know a lot of people kind of fit that bill, but like, I just couldn't wrap my brain around being there. I just was always somewhere else. And I always had these huge self-confidence issues, and those started getting worse and worse as I got older. Yeah. And that's when I think when it kind of full-blown started setting in my early 20s is when it was all of those self-confidence issues I had growing up were like getting worse and worse. And that's where like suicidal thoughts come in and things like that.
So, because I've only known a couple people like close to me that have had bipolar, and so I haven't really dug deep into it. Is it in any part like nature versus nurture, or is it just like you're kind of born with that gene, it's going to happen, or are there like you're maybe predisposed to it, or you're more likely to get it because of your DNA, because of your brain chemistry, and then like maybe things can trigger it? How does that?
Yeah. So I'm not an expert. I don't ever claim to be, but like in my own personal experience, like my own personal research, a lot of times mental illness is a genetic situation. There are situations that'll pop up where like someone will have such a traumatic experience that it will like create, it'll create the chemical imbalance, because that's 99.9% of the times what it is a chemical imbalance in your brain. And that's why I know this is somewhat taboo, but I'm a big proponent of finding what works best for you. I take some medication. I know some people are very against that, which is fine. My whole thing is just do what works best for you. Yeah. And so whether that's, altering the chemical imbalance with another chemical, or some people have found a lot of balance in, getting out in nature, exercise, like getting super deep into like, like their diet and what foods affect them and things.
And it's probably a spectrum. Like some people probably have it way worse and they need medication.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is there is no black and white that I've experienced when it comes to mental illness. Is it's pretty gray. Yeah. Because everyone experiences things very different. And then like, I remember kind of being almost a little bit ignorant to the word like trigger, like, triggering, like you almost, it's kind of, it gives me the ick when I think back of how I used to be like, it's, of course it's triggering. Right. But it's like, I have to actively avoid triggers because I don't ever want to get back to the places that I've been before, not only for myself, but for my wife. She's been along for this whole ride. We got married when I was 23. Yeah. And undiagnosed. Right. So yeah, it's mental health is like this really convoluted gray area that like, I don't think there's any two cases that are identical.
Right. So for you, are your triggers sort of connected back to those early like self-esteem issues, or is it anger that sets you off? What are
Yeah, so mine was so yeah, a lot of my main triggers are like emotional triggers, like getting too emotionally worked up around a situation where I was too vulnerable with certain people or certain situations, and then that came back to bite me.
Yeah.
And then feeling like extremely let down, or kind of like stabbed in the back, so to speak, and then you just kind of spiral and go down the rabbit hole. And I was on a medication at the time when I kind of had my full blown mental breakdown that led to my diagnosis at 27. That, come to find out, was like the worst medication I could have been on, because it was like a misdiagnosed situation. Okay, had doctors that thought it was, oh, this is what your issues are, let's get you on this. Was on that for years, found out that was making everything worse. And then after I got off that, realizing that I was actually more of the depressive side of bipolar, but the other medications were making me more hallucinogenic. Oh, wow. Yeah. So it was like heightening that potential side of bipolar. But that's what it's saying, is it's a constant battle of like medication changes, like trigger avoidance, and just being hyper aware of just like the capability, I guess, that your brain has of getting to a dangerous spot.
Yeah, for sure. So do those hallucinations go kind of hand in hand with whatever mania you're experiencing?
Yeah, so mine were so bipolar is, I mean, I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy, because there are just so many sad stories of people that fall down like a super bad addiction trail. Or like super bad financial mistakes, like blowing life savings on the most ridiculous things, because you get in this like state of euphoria that like you're bulletproof. Like, and some people have like literally feel like that.
How long does that usually last?
I mean, that's the thing, is it could be like a very short period, because you can have like kind of rapid cycling, which I've been through that, where that's where the term of like, oh, I'm being a little bipolar comes from, where people are like, oh, you're happy, then you're sad. Like that's a real thing. Like I've put my wife through some hard times when we would have an argument, and I would be all the way over here really intense. And then 45 minutes later, I'm like, why are you mad?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's extremely traumatizing. Like, and it's like, I can't even kind of wrap my brain around the fact that I used to do things like that.
Right.
But, my manic episodes were, they were more so like the darkest parts of my mind manifesting itself as like almost like another person that I couldn't, I have full blown memories of a person sitting on the foot of my bed late at night.
Is that a little schizophrenic?
See, that was some of, I went through all these different conversations and talks and tests with psychiatrists and other therapists and stuff. But, that was never really a concern. I've never really checked any of those boxes other than it was like, hypermania, like with some of the medication I was on, and it was registering as just telling me the worst parts about myself, telling me why I shouldn't be here, telling me why I was the worst person for my wife, who was pregnant with our second kid at the time. And my daughter was 18 months old. Like it was just, it's, you can't escape it, because you're the only person who I could see him or hear him. Yeah. And it was just, that's the trauma for me.
That's a lot. How did you meet your wife?
Through mutual friends.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So she, her name is Chelsea, and she's literally an absolute lifesaver. She, I would have to say, almost single-handedly saved my life in that time period, because of the fact that she never gave up on me. Yeah. And still to this day, she is right there next to me. And we met through mutual friends. I just had a friend group growing up, or not necessarily growing up, just kind of got later on in my early 20s, and a friend's just saying, hey, I've got a friend that I think you guys would be really, really cute together, really fun together. And she was completely different than any girl I had ever dated. And normally I went after the very like loud girl.
Yeah.
And she was not.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
was sweet. She was kind. She was just very, very reserved, you know, and I say this all the time is that if you've got a problem with her, you're more than likely the problem. Like speaking from personal experience, but yeah. And it was, I tried really hard to get her to like notice me and like pay attention. And like, that was almost kind of like, not that I had girls ignore me all the time, but, and that was, so I finally got her to, to like, we start hanging out, and then it clicked really fast, and we were married within about a year.
Wow.
So
what was it about her that like you were like, oh man, this is different. This is like, I'm starting to fall pretty hard.
she just was it was so like comforting. Like I never felt the need to be next to someone so deeply. Like I never felt like,
you just felt drawn.
Yeah. Like it was just like, if I wasn't with her or like talking to her, I just like, I was thinking about the next time I would.
Yeah.
Like and there was a period where we were long distance. I was living here in Utah working, and she was back in Sacramento, where we're from. And I would leave work at 5:00 on Friday, and I would drive straight there. And it's a 723-mile drive, and I'd get there in 8 hours.
Yeah.
Like I just would not stop.
Yeah.
I mean, gas, bathroom, drink,
Right.
go. And I'd get to her house at about, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I'd stay with her all weekend, hang out with her all weekend, go home to my parents' house for like, an hour or two of sleep, and then go back to her house.
Yeah.
And then I would leave her house Sunday night, like 8, 9 o'clock, and roll into work on Monday.
Yeah.
And I would do that once or twice a month until we got married. So yeah, it's just, she's unlike any person I've ever met.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was unbelievably like at my wedding, some of my football buddies from high school, and they, you haven't seen in a few years. One of them was like, dude, I did not see you landing her. So, like they had no idea who she is, but just like, just meeting her within a minute, like you can't help but love her. She's so sweet. She's kind. She's empathetic. She thinks ahead about what people, she just thinks ahead of what she can do for people, and how people might perceive a situation, so that she doesn't hurt them. Like, I think that's such an endearing quality to like,
about people,
to like constantly like trying not to hurt somebody, because so many people are just constantly thinking inward.
Yeah.
So
do you find yourself thinking like almost like imposter syndrome? Like, how did I arrive here?
Yeah.
Like, how did I get so lucky?
Yeah. Cause that's, I don't know the statistic. I but there's a massively high chance that marriages, especially with a bipolar spouse, with mental health issues, things like that, they tend to end in divorce, because what people don't realize is that the spouse or the partner or, the person that you're the closest to, like they take so much of the brunt of what you're dealing with. Right.
Yeah.
They have to put themselves on the back burner a lot, because you're so touch and go at times. Like there's entire support groups that exist just for spouses and partners of somebody with a mental health issue a mental illness. But yeah, there's been times where I can't fathom the fact that, I was able to find the perfect person to keep me from making an irreversible decision.
Yeah.
I wrote her 3 different, goodbye letters over the years.
Yeah.
I never gave them to her. They were at different points in my life that I hung on to them for years, and I only recently in the last, year or two got rid of them. But I owe everything to my wife and to my children, because they're the only reason I kept going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. What for you is like, this is one of those questions that really, really could answer in any way, but what for you is a good definition of love?
Oh, dude. That's a deep question. What's a good definition of love?
Because it feels like and I just love talking about relationships and love and those things. And it's interesting. I love asking people about like how they met their significant other or whatever, because you can kind of see with certain people, they kind of light up when they talk about them. Right.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see, even if they don't articulate it super well, you can kind of see how in love they are.
Yeah.
And some people, they answer almost like, just like a trivia question. Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Like A, B, C, or D.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's cool. I can see that love you guys have, but, yeah, for you, what does that really mean to be in love with somebody?
I think that answer is like constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it morphs throughout the years, right? Like the love I felt when I first told my wife I loved you, which was very fast, by the way.
Yeah.
I was that guy. Versus when we got married. Versus,
did she say it back?
Not right away.
Really?
Yeah, it took a minute.
Did she say thank
you? It wasn't long. I think it was like a day or two,
Okay.
right? But versus when we got married, and then like the love that happened when when we had our first baby, and so I think love, like the definition of like love to me is I had some experiences where I thought my definition of love fit, but it changed with some people. It's just it's being there and always being there, and is just unconditional. Like there's times where you're going to be angry, there's times you're going to be hurt, there's times where you're going to be pissed, you're going to be, all these negative emotions that come with relationship and marriage and things, but they're still there. Yeah. Like I'm not giving up on you. I'm not walking away. So for me, the definition of love is just is staying and working through and giving the last of everything you have, because you're individual people, but you're one person at the same time.
Yeah.
Like you morph into that person. Like you like create almost like this one personality that fits within both of you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I like the idea of like, people always talk about love and then unconditional love, but I like the idea of just being like, well, no, if it's love, it is unconditional.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Because I mean, what is love that's conditional?
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like,
it's transactional.
Yeah, it's love adjacent, but, yeah, that's really beautiful. I wanted to read this poem to you.
Okay.
And I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Sure.
This is probably my favorite poem ever, but it kind of talks about just kind of this inner fight we have with ourselves, and how within that fight, I think we can find great beauty and great strength. Yeah. And so I thought about that when you were talking about, how there's been multiple times where you've, been all but ready to give up, It's by Charles Bukowski. And he says, "The nights you fight best are when all the weapons are pointed at you, when all the voices hurl their insults while the dream is being strangled. The nights you fight best are when reason gets kicked in the gut, when the chariots of gloom encircle you. The nights you fight best are when the laughter of fools fills the air, when the kiss of death is mistaken for love. The nights you fight best are when the game is fixed, when the crowd screams for your blood. The nights you fight best are on a night like this, as you chase 1,000 dark rats from your brain, as you rise up against the impossible, as you become a brother to the tender sister of joy, and move on regardless."
Whoa. Dude, that one hits pretty hard, because that's because when you're in your, everyone says that, like, I've come from rock bottom, and I'm not trashing anybody's rock bottom. I'm not tearing anybody down of what their low was, because everybody's low, everybody's high. They're all different. They're very personal. But like that felt very personal. Dude, it's not very common that I'm like lost for words because I don't know how to like wrap my brain around being kind of like seen in a poem but written by somebody that I don't know.
Yeah.
Because actually in one of the last podcasts the last episodes that Tyson and I did, I talked about a reoccurring dream that I had
Mm-hmm.
where I was on a battlefield, and for years when I was in my darkest point, I would start charging forward, like armor, swords, shields, and I would sit down and I'd give up.
Yeah.
Everybody would be disappointed in me. But only a couple weeks ago, I had that dream again, and I hadn't had it in years. But this time, I was ahead of everybody. I was charging, like everybody was following me, and it was a subconscious nod to myself that I saw myself differently because I'd been in the situation where my back was against the wall, and everybody was calling. It felt like everybody was calling for my blood, and even myself. There was parts of myself that was calling for it.
Yeah.
So, thanks for that. But I think that I know this is super cliche, but when you hit that point where you're looking at the possibility of losing everything that you have, realizing in that moment that there's nothing else you want more than to just keep what you have.
Yeah.
That you just fight. Like I hate to say that like it's cliche because I know a lot of people feel like they can't.
Yeah.
And that's very valid.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I found when I felt like everybody was calling for my blood and everybody was coming at me and nothing was working for me. So when I realized my wife was standing right next to me.
Yeah.
I was coming home and my babies were like, "Hey, Dad." Like, so like that's the reason why, the reason why I fight is everybody can come for me at this point as far as I can care. Everybody can turn on me because I know who my people are now. I know who stood by me in those times, because you feel like you're alone and you fight your best fight when you feel like you're alone. But as soon as you start getting a leg up, you realize like, oh, I actually do have a couple people next to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need that poem, but,
yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I just, one of the reasons I love it so much is because I think a lot of times people that struggle with mental health, it's easy to think like, it's easy for them to just feel like they're so weak.
Oh, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at so many points it's debilitating, and at so many points it's, they let down their family or they let down themselves, or, something crazy happens. And I just wish these people could feel like they're warriors, because that's what they are.
Yeah.
Because to keep fighting in all this, like, people that don't struggle with mental health, and everyone does a little bit in their own way, and a lot of times it's circumstantial.
Yeah.
You don't really struggle with depression, but then someone close to you dies.
Yeah.
So I feel like everyone at some point in life, they go through that where it feels like, I love this line, as you chase 1,000 dark rats from your brain.
Yeah, dude.
You feel like there's just nothing but darkness and evil and chaos in there. But that's when you fight your best.
Well, see, this is one of the reasons why I am as vocal as I am on social media and just in general. Like I try really hard, to like be the guy, the same guy in life as I am on social media. Like nothing's an act.
Yeah.
But because when you realize, when you've had those experiences of what it's like to have 1,000 dark rats in your head, when you've had the feelings, the suicidal thoughts, like you realize that it's not weakness. Like, we have a really good friend that has an organization that works with veterans and first responders that have PTSD, and his motto and his slogan is, "It's not weak to speak."
Yeah.
And I wouldn't wish darkness on anybody. And like you said, I love that you said that, because there is there is mental health, which everybody experiences, and then there's mental illness that people experience on completely different spectrums and levels. And there is situational, seasonal, all that stuff. You lose a job, somebody passes away, you have a baby, like there's highs and lows everywhere. But it's when you have a chemical imbalance or something happen that you almost have no control over that. Yeah. And then when your brain is telling you, and when the thing that controls everything you do, not only just, your physical aspect of your body, but like your consciousness is telling you that you're a burden and that the people that you love would be better off without you. Like there's no one else to combat that, because it's inside your head. Yeah. And most people don't express those feelings. And when they do, a lot of the time, some people aren't equipped to hear them. Right. They'll say like, "Oh no, don't think like that." Yeah. Like they're trying, but like
they just throw cliches at you.
Yeah, that's why I'm a huge proponent of like therapy, and that's why I'm like, if you're experiencing any type of mental illness, not just mental health, but like go see a psychiatrist. Yeah. Like go see the person whose whole job is brain chemistry. Right. And I can't put into words what it feels like to have yourself talk to you almost like it's somebody else. Like you're having a conversation
like an enemy.
Yeah. Telling you that like, this is not the life that you wanted for her. Like, why are you putting her through this? Yeah. Like, what are your children going to think of you when you're older, dude? Like just be done now, and then they can move on. Everybody can move on. Like you're taxing. Yeah. You're a burden. And I don't say the word hate very often, but like I absolutely hate when people say that, oh, someone took the easy way out.
Right. Yeah.
Like speaking ill of somebody who maybe lost their battle. Yeah. Because you don't know what goes on inside someone's head, and that's why we push so hard. Because if I get one guy message me, be like, "Hey man, thanks, I appreciate that. I've been struggling with this." Like, that's a win. Yeah. And I don't have anything to prove to anybody except for my wife and children. Yeah. So it's like, if you think I'm weak, I feel bad for you, because if you want to sit down, we can talk about all the reasons why I don't think I'm weak. And then I can also show you reasons where I think that you're strong. Like, so.
But it's funny that people think that, because to me, to not talk about your feelings is extremely weak.
Yeah. Yeah, I like I said, it's a weird, almost like hypocritical dynamic to be like, talk about, like being strong or speaking up is a show of strength, but then at the same time combating the people that are, saying the opposite, and trying not to be demeaning when you're talking to them, because it's like extremely frustrating, because it's like you're literally like, you're the stigma. like can you stop it? Like it doesn't. I just had an interaction with somebody the other day on social media, and I was like, please, like help me understand what you're gaining from telling somebody else to end their life on social media. Right. Like maybe it's time for therapy. Like you're kind of proving the point. Mm-hmm. Like you're not showing it. You're not by pluming out your feathers and peacocking around and showing everybody how tough you are. You're really kind of showing everybody that you got some stuff to work through. Yeah. And that's completely fine. Yeah. Go to the therapist. Like it's amazing when you sit down. I did cognitive behavioral therapy for years. Mm-hmm. For months, along with, other types of therapy and psychiatry and stuff. What I learned about myself, just kind of peeling back the layers and realizing what's mental illness, what's a bad habit, and what's my personality. Yeah. Then you're realizing like, okay, I can take a medication and a treatment plan for this. I can work on that bad habit. And like this one is like, well, that's who I am. Yeah. So nobody has the right answer to every question. Yeah. But I view people I hold people in such high regard that are just trying to be better people, period.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I've heard that too before, the whole, like, I hate how they took the easy way out, and, I think if you live long enough, you know people that have committed suicide, and I've had some close friends take their lives, and
I'm sorry.
There's this novel I read, and the author is David Foster Wallace. He's one of my favorite writers, and he The irony is he ended up committing suicide. But he was writing about how people think that when you commit suicide, you just don't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And he said, it's like a person that jumps out of a burning building. He's like, they don't want to plummet to their death. They don't want to jump out of a building, but it's a slightly better reality than getting burned alive.
Dude, that's such like a perfect and painful like analogy.
Yeah.
Like that's, I don't think I've ever heard it stated that way, but it's far too often that people say it's a selfish decision.
Yeah.
I can somewhat understand why, because the pain that is left behind is far greater in some aspects than what some people might have been going through.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, like you're jumping out of a burning building because you're tired of, you're tired of getting hurt in that way. And this is a relief.
Yeah.
You think about it. Like I think about it all the time, like who was one of the funniest guys of our childhood, like Robin Williams.
Right.
Like he was everywhere.
Yeah.
Movies, TV shows, like, stand up, and like everybody loved him. Everybody loved that guy. But he was the saddest clown in the bunch.
Yeah.
And nobody knew that. And that's the thing is you could be sitting next to somebody that is having the worst day of their life. And so like how you talk to them can impact them more than you can understand.
Yeah.
And so
that's why I hate when I am, you can tell when you're in a mood and you're just so fixated on yourself, but it's trivial stuff. You're in a mood. You're going to the grocery store. You can't be bothered by any little thing. But I hate when I feel like I'm in that spot because I know, a lot of people I come in contact with, they might be going through hell 10 times worse than whatever stupid thing I'm going through.
Yeah.
Right. And it, like you said, it might be the worst day of their life. And for me to come to them with bad energy is only going to make it worse. And so if I have the opportunity to make on someone's worst day to make that a little bit better or not their worst day, that's a great gift.
Yeah. And I wish that I could say that I'm on point every single day,
sure,
right?
Yeah.
Like I still come home from, a very demanding job and I've had bad days. And then there's the social media sides that I have, I still have to, produce content for, and that takes up a lot of time. And then there's the podcast stuff and like, you're stretched in 37 different ways. And then, my kids are 6 and 8 and then, you snap at them.
Yeah.
And you're like, gosh, like, you feel horrible at that. Or like, I'm zoned into, finishing editing something and my wife is talking to me and I'm not really, like, that's I'm like, yeah. And then realizing that it was something really important, and I feel guilty because sometimes I have these like big epiphanies, like when we're recording a podcast or like, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to take that home and I'm going to change this or whatever. But realizing that we're human and you make a ton of mistakes over and over and over. But yeah, I try hard to like leave a positive impact with people. Because there's just again, we said cliche 100 times on this episode, but like, there's just too much freaking negativity out there where it's constant. It's almost expected. People just expect to have bad days. People are just expecting, like, you go to the gas station, you're picking up an energy drink. You're like, oh, hey, how's it going? Well, it's all right.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Monday again. Like, oh, not too bad.
Right,
like, a lot of those are canned answers, but I've got some friends that have become very infectious that I've met and they've only been friends for a short amount of time. But it's like, you ask that guy when he's picking up a drink at the gas station, like, how you doing? He's like, I'm doing freaking amazing. And you're like, look, cash register, the cashier looks up and like, what? Like they don't expect it. So perspective is a huge thing for me too. But I think when you find the ability to look outside your own emotions is when you like learn a little bit more, I guess, if that's a good way of putting it. But Yeah, I still have bad days.
Yeah,
I still have days where I'm like, I got to make sure I check my face because I can look very aggressive on accident.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you could be scary at a gas station.
But I'm only 5'10", so I'm not that scary.
Right. Yeah. What's maybe the best thing that you have gleaned from therapy, a practice that you've implemented that's helped you the most?
So it's funny. I haven't actually had been in like sit down therapy for a couple years now. But one thing that stuck with me from the earlier stages, this is again from cognitive behavioral therapy. I've talked about this before. I don't know if this is super healthy or not, but it has worked really well for me. Mm-hmm. Is that I put people in boxes of expectations. And this is after I've had like interactions with them, like a number of them. Like I try not to like have a preconceived notion about somebody. Yeah. But I have to be that again, kind of going back to like what some of my triggers are. Like somebody else's emotional reactions to me can trigger my emotional instability if I'm not like on my meds, on other treatment plans and stuff that I do. So like if my experience with you exists within that box of expectation, no surprises, everything's good. Like, whether that's the expectation, includes like positive or negative things. Like I kind of expect you to be, someone to be a jerk,
right?
Versus, when someone does exceed that box, then it's like, okay, kind of think this through. How am I going to respond? Versus before it was emotionally respond, think about it later. And that's where like the explosion comes from, or like the extreme emotional responses, or like you've probably made a decision in like a high emotional state, right? Sure. And you go back later and you're like it's like cringe or whatever. Like, I had those, through the roof. So that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned in therapy was just set positive, realistic expectations of your relationships with other people for like my own safety and sanity, not like to hold them to a standard. Like they had to live up to my standards, but so that I could avoid, certain levels of toxic relationships that might be somewhat necessary. Right. Yeah. So that was, I still do it to this day. Like, and at the same time I have learned it's okay to cut people out. Yeah. Yeah. That's a hard one. That was a really hard one to learn. And it's okay to restrict what you say to certain people. Yeah. Yeah. I had a communications class my freshman year of college, and the professor was kind of a maverick, kind of a wildcat. Yeah. And he said something really interesting that is funny. I don't know if I totally agree, but I kind of like the principle. He said, if there's people in your life that you have conflict with, and that conflict causes you pain, he's like, you have two choices. You either confront it and talk to them about it, or you cut them out of your life. Yeah. And I was like, oh, dang. Like that's, did you ever confront somebody and it didn't go well? Here's the thing. I'm not a very confrontational person, but I'm happy to, like, if I got issues, I'll go talk to you about it. Right. I'm trying to think, you know what? This is funny because I don't know that I handled it super well, but I remember when I was a kid, I was really close friends with this kid. Like, we would have sleepovers all the time. We'd play basketball together. But I just kind of started to feel like he wasn't treating me very well. Yeah. And, I'm like 12 or something, but I'm just like, oh, I kind of feel like he makes fun of me a lot. Yeah. Like, and I was a pretty sensitive kid, and he was just kind of a bruiser and not very sensitive. And I remember telling my dad, like, I just sometimes don't like hanging out with him. Yeah. But I felt like loyal to him as a friend. Oh, yeah. We've been friends for a few years. And my dad basically was like, it's okay to like end friendships, And at the time, like, I just tried to kind of slowly freeze him out. Like, yeah, I was just like slowly back away. Yeah. Yeah. Just try to spend less time with them and
you know, as an adult, I would handle it differently. You know, I would, you know, tell them the things that are bothering me. But as a kid, like I didn't know how to have those conversations. So I just decided it was a net negative to have him in my life. And so I didn't really remove him. I kind of removed myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's because that's what you had control over was yourself.
Yeah. But I think that's what you have to do. You have to decide, is this relationship ultimately like causing me more pain than it is joy, you know? But it's hard if that person is like a parent, or that person is your boss, or, you know, like there's a lot of scenarios where it's like, it's maybe not super black and white.
Yeah. Like it's, where, you know, that answer doesn't necessarily fit like, you know, perfectly, but it's more of a square peg round hole situation where you kind of have to, you know, you have to make it fit somewhat. Like you can set boundaries, you know, you might have to still operate a little bit within that relationship, but like you know, I've had a number of boundaries that like I've had to set for that exact, you know, type situation where there's people that are in your life, but you know, they may not necessarily be able to handle certain situations or topics or conversations, you know, to a point where it could be potentially unhealthy or dangerous or toxic. So,
and I've also realized like some of it's on me. Like a lot of times, for instance, I get asked all the time by people like, how's dating going? Cause I'm single.
Sure.
And I'm in a culture, a demographic where I'm very old for being single, right? So I get asked about it every day by somebody. And sometimes I want to be like, hey, will you leave me alone? Will you ask a more interesting question?
Yeah, exactly.
Will you ask about my life? You know? But I know for the most part, people mean well. It's not malicious, right? So sometimes I feel myself wanting to like create boundaries or like tell people to not ask me or whatever. But ultimately I'm like, I think a little bit of that's on me. Like that's a little bit my insecurity.
Oh, okay.
And so maybe the onus is on me to not take things so personally.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I get that 100%. And I don't think that actually Tyson and I just talked about this where it's like, sometimes that word boundary gets used as like an excuse a lot. Like people use it to like, you know, escape, responsibility or maturity or things like that. Versus I think the boundaries come after like repeated experiences and they should be used more of like a protection against, you know, a certain situation or person, not necessarily because it's like, well, I don't like that topic, you know, like, I mean, we live in a society where you can shut out any bit of information you don't like, and you can find information to support your opinion everywhere. Yeah. So I think it's a very good perspective to have of like you being able to look inward and like, well, there's a good chance that I might be part of the problem. And I know for a fact there's a good chance that I've been part of the problem a lot of the time. But
I think a lot of times it's a combination. Right? It's maybe you do need to set a little bit of a boundary or tell people if something's a little bit hurtful, but also recognize that maybe you're being insecure about it. Maybe you have your own issues.
Insanely over emotional or neurotic about it. 100%.
How important to you is sort of the practice or the idea of gratitude in your life, especially with your mental illness and things you struggle with? How important is gratitude?
Dude, gratitude is massive for me. That's something that I have gleaned from a very good friend of mine very recently. And talk about having a big beard. That guy's beard is literally past his belt buckle.
Oh, good.
And he showed me like the power of gratitude. And I know it sounds like so gaggy when you talk about it, but like until you experience it, like, and you like really try to put it to use. So he put me onto this thing that he calls the wake up list, where every single day, like before your feet hit the ground, you try to think of 3 things that you're like legitimately grateful for. And, you know, sometimes that's hard. It's insanely hard. So I started doing like the alphabet, like, hey, A, I'm grateful for this and this and this. But when you dude, it almost like forces your perspective to change when you realize like I woke up today.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody didn't.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the economy freaking sucks. And like my rent is through the roof. But if I buy a house, it'll be, if I even could qualify for a house, it's $1,000 more than my rent that's already high. But it's kind of like, yeah, but you know, I woke up in a house with the air set to whatever temperature I wanted it at. I can afford groceries or whatever, but because there's a lot of people that don't. Mm-hmm. Like gratitude to me has like forced perspective into my life, but then shown me like everything that I have.
Yeah.
And I feel like that has been a major part of what has put me in the mindset that I am today, of that. Okay, I'm at the moment, I'm part of the very small percentage of people that haven't taken my own life in this situation, or I'm a part of the percentage of people who haven't lost my marriage. You know, does that mean my marriage is perfect right now? That there's still things that we need to work through? Yeah. It's not perfect, and we still have things we do need to work through. Yeah. But I can't even put into words what gratitude has changed my life since last summer. Like, this guy is insanely infectious.
You can just feel it.
Oh, and it's so real that like comes from him. And his name's Robert. He's huge on social media, and I got to meet him in person, and he is just he was in and out of jail. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, addicted to all different types of things. He just was losing his whole entire life, and something switched in him years and years and years ago. And his biggest lesson he teaches everybody is about gratitude. And the man he is today versus who he used to be, he chalks a ton of it up to gratitude and like discipline and mindset. So I don't almost have a clear-cut answer for you of how important it is to me, because I'm still learning more about it. Mm-hmm. But you
felt a big difference.
Oh, it's like I get kind of tingly. It's like euphoric when you start, when you find yourself. Have you ever read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
No.
It's really good.
Yeah.
When you find yourself kind of cognitively realizing there's been a switch of like forcing yourself to be, you know, to think of the things you're grateful for. Like, there was a period where I had an alarm set every hour. My phone would go off and say like, what are you grateful for?
That's cool.
What are you grateful for? And it would force me to think about it. But now it's like, I wake up and it's the first thing I think about. It's like, I woke up next to my wife, you know, like I have a job, you know, like I'm healthy. Like I want to be here. Like I want to live. Yeah. And then it's like when you fill your brain as much as you cognitively can with the things that you are happy about and you are grateful for, it takes away that much more room from the things that are trying to counterbalance that.
Yeah. Cause I think our default settings are sometimes you wake up, let me think about what am I stressed about? Yeah. What do I have to accomplish? Yeah. What is bugging me right now, you know? But yeah, you're kind of just retraining your brain to see all the beauty. One of my buddies that took his life, he did something that was so, I've never met anyone else that has done this. But to me, it was this really cool form of gratitude. And he was kind of funny, silly about it, but he would kind of thank inanimate objects.
Sure.
He would kind of like, we'd be like at the mall, like buying clothes, and he would be like, I'd hear him say like, hey, you're a good shirt.
I like that.
And
it's cool.
And like, we'd be eating pizza and he'd be like, hey, you're a good slice. And like, it was funny. It was funny, and he wasn't being totally serious.
Sure.
But just the fact that he would vocalize kind of all the things that made him happy, you know? And I've found that, a big part of gratitude for me is just vocalizing it.
Yeah.
You know, like last night I wouldn't shut up about, it was just a really cool sunset, and I just get obsessed with sunsets and beautiful cloud formations.
Yeah, dude, I mean, living here in Utah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like I grew up in California, like the mountainscape, like sometimes I live out in Saratoga Springs, so it's like the other side of the lake, and I'm kind of like, man, like the right time of day, you're like, this is a freaking painting.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was just like, I was at my sister's house, and I like went and told my brother-in-law, hey, you got to come out. These clouds are cool. Like, I think just talking about talking about beauty and talking about things that bring you joy, it just reminds your brain that, hey, there are good things.
Oh yeah.
There are good things that are happening, and your life isn't all that bad. And it kind of chases out those rats, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is it's, I wholeheartedly believe that it's important to recognize and like give the dark thoughts like a space to be like heard. Cause like when you shut them out, that's when it gets bad.
Yeah.
Cause when you bottle it up, eventually like you bottle it up and they're going to make themselves heard whether you want it or not.
Yeah. They're just hungry dogs in the
But
cellar.
if you're like, okay, yeah, like that did suck. Like that was horrible. I, you know, or like this is a sucky situation, because it's like not everything is our fault all the time. Like, you know, I was in a freaking battle with my property management company the other day, and it's just like, you just get put in these situations that suck, and then they cost money, and then this is more expensive, and like that happens, or like someone said something to you that was completely unsolicited that was harmful or hurtful, you know, and then there's just the chemical imbalances. Sometimes it just happens because it happens.
Yeah.
But when you ignore those, they get louder and louder and louder, right? So if you give them the space that they, not necessarily deserve, because I feel like I don't deserve a whole lot, but if you give them the space to be heard, then it's easier to like recognize and understand when they come back, but then you can combat them more with positivity and gratitude and discipline. Like I'm probably just as big on trying to understand and implement discipline in my life as I am with gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we've talked about how, like, you know, motivation can be very fleeting, but discipline is something of like, I've had to beat into my head of, it's so counterproductive that one of the hardest things to do when you have a mental illness is take your medication, if that's what works for you. Yeah. Like you think about it, like I've literally had the conversation with my wife. I'm like, why didn't you, like, she can tell when I'm off. Like she can pin it on the nose. And she's like, why don't you, it's a pill. Yeah. Like, you know, why don't? And it's like, well, cause like, I didn't want you, or like, you know, and sometimes they make you feel like crap. Sometimes it's like, but versus like, it's like, I take it at the same time every single night, you know, and if I don't, it's like, then I kind of fell, I dropped down, you know, I kind of dropped below on my discipline. And so there's certain things where gratitude, discipline, mindset can make a massive change in your life. Yeah. But at the same time, like, they're not always the perfect answer to everything. Like, you have to give the dark thoughts, you have to give the sad thoughts, you have to give the negative thoughts room to breathe. But doesn't mean you gotta let them, you know, it doesn't mean you can't push them back below the water and keep them where they belong. Right.
So drown them a little bit.
I mean, that's a fair game.
Yeah. Dude, since you've been doing your podcast for the last year or so, what has been kind of your experience as, like, it seems like you love it. It seems like it's something that brings some joy and some light into your life. How cathartic has it been?
Dude, we say this all the time, is that show is more therapeutic to me and Tyson than it is than we feel like it is to anybody else. Sure. Because it's a very weird dynamic when you can find one of the best friends you'll ever have when you're in your like mid 30s and mid 40s. Yeah. Because Tyson's about 10 years older than me. It's very weird. Right? Like, it's when you think about it, like if you see any of the content we put on social media, like some of the stuff that we get up to, it's almost kind of like being back in high school. Yeah. But the stuff that, like, I feel comfortable talking about, like, because I'm sitting across from my best friend. Yeah. And sometimes you forget, like, the microphone is there, the camera's there. And it's insanely cathartic. It's insanely therapeutic. And then to find out, like, someone messages us, I'm like, dude, I've been dealing with the same thing. Or like, hey, like, I called Tyson almost crying one day. I'm like, dude, this guy just made a freaking therapy appointment because he's been battling with this and this and this. And he's like, hey, you guys inspired me. I have an appointment today at 2:00. And I'm like, good for you, dude. Yeah. Whereas a massive part of society and men will tell you, like, oh, that's weakness. Yeah. I don't need to go to therapy. I just drink my problems. Yeah. Like, okay. Yeah. But that's, not that I'm tearing somebody down that might do that, but we're just trying to like, with the podcast and with social media and stuff that we do, we're just trying to like show people, like, you can be the strong, like, devoted husband, father, friend, brother, partner, whatever. And you can be this sign of strength, but you can also still be like empathetic. Yeah. You can also still talk about your struggles. And I know that people have been burnt talking to people about their struggles. And my response to that is, other than I'm sorry, he was like, well, unfortunately, you found out the hard way that they're not one of your people.
Yeah.
Like when you start kind of like curating your people, it's this whole different life, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I know that I can be 100% myself with this person, and this person.
Yeah.
And it is insanely freeing to like, it's insanely freeing to feel that. And then to have the experience to sit down with one of those people and share my thoughts and my feelings, and him do the same. And then people to gain and glean something from it. Yeah. It's insanely rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't care if we're not freaking Joe Rogan one day.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah.
It's like we're leaving a positive impact. And that to me is something that I can boast to my children about one day.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I did my absolute best at trying to help people.
Yeah.
And you call it selfish or whatever. I feel like the more I try to help people, the more it kind of helps me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a huge proponent on social media. I use a lot of humor to try to push that. Sometimes it's dark, but because it's relatable.
Right.
But sometimes I will like make a piece of content and realizing that like, that was actually something I kind of needed to get out. But I twisted it in a funny, relatable way. Or sometimes I will get serious with it. And I can't say it enough that the more you get stuff out, the better it feels.
Yeah.
It's just, it takes weight off your shoulders. And if you've been burnt by people who tell you that it's not okay to do that, or who have made you feel less than or put you down for doing that, then I would kind of suggest maybe try and find some new people.
Yeah. Yeah. I had this, because I talk a lot about relationships and love, every once in a while, I'll get a comment saying like, oh, it's not worth it. I've been burned. And, like marriage is a scam. And, and yeah, it's hard because, what can you say to these people? But the reality is, I'm sorry you've had a horrible experience, but that's not everyone's experience. And those are the wrong people, and it sucks that you had to find those wrong people, but there are right people out there, that will only add joy to your life, will only add light to your life. Yeah. But it's hard if your only experience has been negative,
Well, and I'm glad that you said that, because it's like, you have to experience those things and those people to like know what to look for. Right. And that's what it is that I feel like that's one of the major problems with society in general, is that everyone just assuming that their experience is the experience. Yeah. Or like their thoughts are like, like that's what it is. When in reality, like nothing's black, nothing's white. Yeah. Like nothing's, just round or just square. Like everything is so open to interpretation, and everything is so open to it's just super fluid. Like we're all existing on the same freaking rock, trying our best. And I think we have a responsibility to not only take care of ourselves as best we can, but like dude, it's just, I'm kind of a part of the whole, like, do no harm vibe. Like, cause there were so many years where I was doing the exact opposite. Yeah. That it wasn't serving me or anyone around me at all. Like, it was just causing turmoil and stress and pain. But like, sometimes you gotta be the saddest clown in the room, just so you can help lift someone else up. And then, it's made me feel a little bit better. Yeah.
No, that's cool. What's your approach as a father that struggles with mental illness? What's your approach in communicating that to your kids, what you're going through, especially when they're so young? And maybe that's kind of a non-issue right now, and maybe you're still planning on how you're going to attack that in the future.
So I think what that has done is, and thank you for asking that, because my daughter, she's 8. Mm-hmm. She's spitting image of her mom, and she's going to give me problems one day. but she is already, and this is going to be kind of controversial because I know some people think that like things are overdiagnosed nowadays. She's already showing signs of some anxiety issues, very real, you know, and it's not, I don't really care to convince anybody of that.
Sure.
Because she struggles with some stuff every now and then. Like we call them like big feelings, like big thoughts, you know, and she loses sleep over it sometimes, and she's only 8. I've actually connected with a lady through social media that wrote a book about teaching kids about anxiety and creating this little toolbox that like, hey, when you're feeling these big feelings, you know, like she has a whole list of things that she enjoys that help her relax, help her take a breath, help her calm down. So whether, she's insanely intelligent for an 8-year-old. She goes and like reads Harry Potter when she's really struggling, or she has a journal that like for an 8-year-old, the stuff that is written in that journal is mind boggling, like how aware she is of her own feelings. So I kind of live in this somewhat constant state of fear, with my kids, because I know mental illness is genetic. I've kind of seen where, you know, my family before me where like, oh, okay, well that kind of makes sense with me because of so and so. So my wife and I are big on just like open communication. I mean, we don't really, they don't know what the word, you know, or term bipolar means, but they know that it's important to like take a step back and talk, and that sometimes, you know, we have big feelings, we have big thoughts, we have big emotions, and it's important to not say something mean in those times. And so I think it starts early, teaching your kids that it's to speak up, you know, to tell me how you're feeling, because I don't care what society, religion, politics, or anybody says. I want to build trust and love within my relationship with my children, that they will come to me no matter what their problems are. No matter what they're feeling, no matter what they're experiencing. I want them to know that like mom and dad are always going to just listen to me first.
It's safe. And
like, that's my safe space. Like I will, like, there's nothing that my kids can say or do that I can fathom that would make me, you know, just tell them to shut up, or tell them to like, you know, like, oh, don't talk about that. Or like, it's just, I want my kids to know that like, this is always home. I don't care how old you get, how big you get. Like I'm here for you 100% all the time, every day. And so it starts with when your 8-year-old starts telling you that she feels like this, shut up and listen. Like, you know, like there's probably a handful of times in high school that I probably could have said something to somebody, but I didn't, because, you know, you didn't. And we talked about that. So I'm a huge believer in, you know, don't push something on your kid of like, you know, don't push like a diagnosis or whatever. Don't tell them they have this, but like listen and like try to understand and like ask questions that make them think. Like, what, you know, well, I'm feeling like this. Well, okay, when you feel like this, like, you know, are you having a hard time, like, you know, are you having a hard time paying attention in school? Like, do you have a hard time being nice? Like, you know, like, how do you react when this happens? Or, you know, when so-and-so said that, like, how'd that make you feel? It's like you said, like with your friend growing up, like, Dad, I don't really know how to like navigate this, but he makes me feel bad. Like it's important. I feel like we're raising, you're, you know, as a parent, you're raising the next generation. You're raising the next set of people who are going to make laws and be leaders and raise another set of kids, hopefully one day, if that's what they want. But it's the most rewarding and difficult job I've ever had. And that's only what I do is only a fraction of what my wife does. Right. You know?
I think as a parent, maybe the worst thing you can do is make your kid feel stupid for telling you something, you know?
Absolutely.
Because not only are they going to think twice before they come back and tell you something else, but they're going to feel like to feel that is stupid, you know? So I hate when I see that, when I see, you know, you can tell that people's emotions and feelings are squandered at home. You know, it's really sad.
Like, don't be wrong, I still have bad days.
Sure.
Like, I still have the emotional emotional highs in a bad way. Like like I said, I'll still have like anger moments. And it's insanely hard and gives you some perspective when your daughter's like, well, I don't want you to get mad.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, like
that means she's thinking.
It means like what,
sometimes daddy's mad,
or like what happened, that made you think like that's like, what about this situation is similar to the last time this happened? That was your fear that I was going to overreact. So it's, when you realize the impact that you have on like literally a forming brain, because kids can't think critically till they're like 13, 14 years old, right?
I still can't.
Still can't. Yeah. I guess I saw this thing on social media that said that, and I don't know if it's 100% true. They say that the adult that you are today is who you would have felt safest with as a kid. So I try to be that for my kids. Yeah. A lot of it does come naturally, but then there's a lot of times where you got to work at it. You got to make sure that those kids listen to everything you say, even the potty words. Right? And when your 6-year-old uses a word in perfect context, you're kind of like, wow, they are listening very intently. So I want my kids to grow up to be better people than I am.
Yeah. It's funny how so my nephew is 4 and so it's funny. He's just, he hears a new word, doesn't know what it means, and uses it, you know? And like today he was having breakfast or something, and I was like, I don't know, he said something about his Pop-Tart's cold or something, and I was like, oh, buddy, that's tough. Yeah. And he goes, it's tough if you sit next to me. Like, he just wanted me to sit by him. Yeah. But it's like, it would be tough if you sat next to me. Yeah. Like, he doesn't know what tough means. Yeah. But yeah, he's just going to use that word.
Yeah, 4 is a fun age. Yeah. I mean, they all are. I mean, it's insanely, like heartbreaking to like look back at the pictures and the videos. Cause I mean, now with social media and iPhones, it's just kind of like, it's like emotional like manipulation where it's like, hey, remember this? Like, right. You're like, yeah, I do. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just, like my boy is, I say my daughter's a spitting image of my wife, and my boy is mine. Poor kid. But when they just have like nothing to worry about, like really nothing, no real like severe cares to like, as an adult, like it's so fun to like sit there and listen to them talk sometimes. My kids love to make up words, and sometimes they make up a word that is not good. Yeah. And so, but at the same time, they, like my boy, this is completely off topic, but you kind of got me talking about my kids now. He'll say the funniest things. Like he'll be like, I'm like, hey bud, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just playing with Legos with love. Like, what does that mean? But he's just like, it's just the innocence. And I'm like, like, it makes me feel good. I'm kind of like, he feels comfortable being just a goofball around me. Yeah. It's like, I take pride in the fact of like, my wife and I have built like a safe spot for my kids to just be unapologetically themselves, which also includes like the negative emotions. Yeah. So yeah, dude, kids are fun. We only got 2. And, to imagine like my parents had 7, like it's just crazy. But yeah, it's fatherhood is probably one of the most, like I said, it's most rewarding and difficult. I say job. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it's something you got to work at. But then, dude, walking into the house at the end of the day, and your boy comes running up. He's like, "Hey, Dad," gives you a hug. Yeah. And my daughter, same thing. Like she's a very huggy, very like cuddly, and it's just it melts problems away a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen that even just as an uncle.
Oh yeah, dude.
Like I go to my sister's house, my niece and nephew run up and hug me, and I'm like, well, I guess I don't have any problems anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I was like an uncle at like 14, 15, 16, something cool. like that. Yeah. Right. And now I have like nieces that are graduating high school.
Right. Yeah.
So that's weird because now you're kind of like, you don't really talk to them like, cause like you're not cool enough to talk to them. Right. But yeah, it's, when you realize that the impact you can have on like future generations, whether it's an uncle, like, or even just like friends' kids, right? Like Mike Tyson that guy's got 6 freaking kids, man. Like, I don't know how he has time to do anything.
Right.
But like I try to make sure that when I'm around them that I leave a good example, right? So
it's really cool. My niece that's 8, she like is very disturbed if I like can't come to her dance recital.
Oh yeah.
But I love that she values our relationship and thinks about me and that's important to her. So as long as she continues to act like that, I'm going to do everything I can to be at those dance recitals.
Yeah.
And
that's one thing I count myself extremely lucky for my career. Cause I mean, I don't do social media or anything like that full time. Like I still have a job and, I'm grateful for the position I have in my career where I do my absolute best at not missing anything.
Yeah.
Cause like when you show up and like, that's all I want. When you show up to my daughter is huge into tumbling and like into getting into gymnastics and things like that. And when she has her little showcases, she's trying to do her little back bend and she falls over on the mat or whatever. But when she stands up and sees mom and dad sitting there, right. Or, they do soccer and my son, he's 6 and at that age, it's just a bunch of 6-year-olds chasing a ball. Right. Yeah. But he, when he sees mom and dad sitting there, like that's the thing is like, I try my hardest to show up to everything because it makes a big difference to them.
Yeah, totally.
They want you there. Like you realize like as kids, like all kids ever want to do is they want to like just make the adults happy. You realize that, right? So like whether it's your niece, or like it's like my kids or your nephew, things like that. It's same thing. Like when you can have an impact on kids, you can have an impact on adults. You just try to be positively impactful. I don't know. I'm a big believer in what you put out, you get back. Yeah. I try to be positively impactful to people and I've attracted very positive people in my life and very positive situations. Yeah.
That's how I feel. I feel like I've been just like crazy blessed with the friendships I've had, but I try to, I got to take some credit probably.
Sure. Oh yeah. You put in the effort, you put in the work.
What's, this is kind of a hard question. Okay. So brace yourself. What do you think you love the very most about yourself?
Oh, dude. Yeah, that is a hard question. I don't see, this is one thing I have a hard time. I have a hard time talking about stuff like that.
Sure.
Right. And I don't have a problem with you asking me that question because I don't want to come off arrogant or conceited.
Yeah.
Or because that is a major, like narcissistic features and characteristics are like a major part of like bipolar at times too. Right. Like when you're in the middle of like a manic episode, people feel like, I can tell you that they feel like they're on cloud 9 or like, nobody can compare to them, things like that. So I get careful when I talk about that stuff, but I think it's an important question. So I think what I love most about myself, I just thinking it just sounds so bad. I know that I affect people. I know that I can impact people's lives. And I love that I'm starting to learn how to use that in a positive way. Because for so long I didn't intentionally use it the wrong way, but it came out that way.
Yeah.
So I guess, man, why you gotta be a therapist right now? Like I love that. I love that I positively impact people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's one of the greatest like assets you can have as a human, I think.
Yeah.
It's funny, me and my friends, we call it, maybe you kind of resonate with this. We call it the dark gift, which is someone that is kind of naturally has whatever charisma, charm, affability, ease with people, and you can kind of use it for good or for evil.
Yeah, dude.
And so we call it the dark gift because it can be dark. It can become manipulative. It can become narcissistic. It can become gaslighting. It can become all these things, but it can also become this crazy source of love and light and joy. And so I think for certain people, they can almost recognize, they can see, oh, I could go either way with this.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it takes some maturing and some life experience to go in the right direction with it.
Yeah, no, I see that. Because like one of my biggest fears with that, kind of like how you call it, kind of like a dark gift, is coming across fake.
Yeah.
Because like so much of social media is fake.
Right.
Like everything is faked. Right. And now it's all like, just pushing products and all that stuff. And so like I still get very self-conscious. Like even, like I'll, put something out there that with in hopes of it making an impact or just making someone laugh or just because I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But I get self-conscious because I don't want people to think that like I'm just doing it for likes or for views or because, I'm broken on the inside or whatever. Like dude, you're sitting here making me like comb through my brain of like, what do I love about myself? But that, it's a weird dynamic when you start realizing that something that used to be able to cause so much pain can actually be very positively impactful. Right. Because I was capable of all that stuff. And there was times where I was, manipulative, unintentional and intentional, because when you've got a mask on and you don't want, because that was my biggest battle, was I didn't want anybody to know that I was suicidal, that I was struggling on the inside, that I felt like I did. So you hide, and sometimes, you have to sometimes you use these very negative tactics to keep up that facade, which is lying, which is manipulation, which is gaslighting, and sometimes it just happens. Like you don't sit there and like plan it out, like, make a game plan. It's just like,
it's just your defense mechanism.
You get caught in a trap, you get caught in a corner. And it's like, that's the biggest thing is, there's so much with mental illness that is not your fault, but there is also so much that you do have to take accountability and responsibility for. So it's not always a free pass. Like, oh, well, I was in a really dark spot. Like, okay, but there's still a level of which, like I said, kind of going back to the cognitive behavioral therapy, there's your mental illness, and then there's, your habits, and then there's your personality. Like there is a level of which you're responsible for something within all three of those categories. So it's a daily battle, dude. Like it never ends. But if you're trying to move up, it's better than sitting still. Yeah.
What's your relationship like with God in all this?
So that's actually a very interesting topic. Yeah. It kind of it ebbs and flows. Yeah. I was raised in a very staunch religion. So I have my kind of like roots in that. But when you experience things that you never thought you would, it's really easy to feel alone or feel like things shouldn't be going this way, but they are. And then it's like mind boggling. So that's kind of one of the spots I'm at in my life right now is figuring that out. I don't have even a clear answer for that. And I wish I did. Yeah. But I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I'm kind of exploring that because I know it's massively impactful one way or the other. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really have a clear-cut answer.
Yeah. I think it's just good to acknowledge that you're figuring it out. I think that's better than just saying I don't care or I'm not going to worry about it, or just like anything else. It's a feeling, it's an emotion that you should try to confront and figure out. Okay, last question for you. I always like to do this with my guests. I like to kind of turn the tables and ask, what's one question you would ask me? And you're a podcaster, so you can you can do it quite easily probably. But
yeah, so I guess the one that I've been kind of sitting here, I've been thinking a lot about is like, what's, you get people ask all the time of like, oh, what's your story, right? Or like, what's one thing that like, people ask all the time, like, well, what's one thing if you could give someone one piece of advice, but like if someone were to ask you like the Cliff Notes version of like why you have your podcast, like why you put in the time and effort to do this, because people don't see, I mean, I get it. Like the behind the scenes, like the time, the effort and all that stuff. Like why did you start podcasting?
Yeah.
Why did you start sharing your voice?
I think it's changed over time. You know, I think initially I just thought it'd be fun.
Yeah.
I liked talking and exploring ideas, and I'm a writer, so I liked the idea of kind of an additional creative outlet. And I think you kind of said this before, but it kind of felt both like there's selfish reasons and there's kind of altruistic reasons, right? I want to help people. I want to spread messages. I want to speak truth, explore ideas with people, talk to old friends. But I also want the catharsis for myself. You know, I want to learn things. I want to market myself. I want to spread my art. You know, there's a lot of reasons. I think as time has passed and I've done, 82 episodes and have kind of gotten more of a kind of accidentally developed certain themes, because mine was pretty just open-ended. I just wanted to do a podcast and talk about life, and life encompasses a lot, but I ended up kind of always coming back to relationships and love and emotions and passions and creativity and faith and just things that I care about and think about the most, I guess. And so ultimately I think, why do I keep doing it? Why is it worth it? Why is it something that brings me such joy and I feel like is a bit of a calling in my life, even if that sounds gross, is because I think there's such immense value in letting people know and letting people feel that they're not alone. Even if our circumstance and our trials are deeply different, like take me and you, like I've never struggled remotely with bipolar syndrome, probably not even close. But I can relate to darkness.
Oh yeah.
I can relate to feeling alone, to feeling crazy, to feeling whatever. And you might think like, yeah, but not like me, pal, but that doesn't matter. Like we're both just human beings trying to deal with whatever's hardest in our life right now, And so I love the chance, the opportunity to let someone feel like, dang, like, man, I've felt that, and now I feel a little bit less alone, And that's it's the same thing you get sometimes from listening to music or watching a film, reading a book. You feel a connection with the character, you feel a connection with a lyric, you feel a connection with something, and it makes you just feel a little bit less alone. And if I can do that to somebody, to anybody, then man, I'm happy, man. I feel fulfilled. I feel like that's, what else am I supposed to do with my life?
I love that. That's beautifully put. I mean, yeah, to make people feel less alone, because like I feel like loneliness is one of the biggest problems that people have. And I love that you said that. And I love that you also said that like you can't compare anybody's dark versus dark, light versus light. Yeah. Everybody's thresholds are completely different. Like your lowest low is no different than my lowest low, regardless of the circumstances, because that was still like the lowest you've ever been.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think the way I say this all the time is like comparison is the thief of joy. And so like when you even comparing miseries, like that, like discounts someone else's experience that maybe was a huge pivotal part of what made them who they are, because like, oh, well, I experienced something way worse than that. Like there's no place for that in my opinion. Yeah. And I like that. I identified so much with what you were saying, because I feel like this immense responsibility to like speak for those people who don't maybe like to speak, to like share emotions for people who have a hard time like understanding emotions. So I feel like it's, you know, you get this, like as a podcast, you know, do someone with a voice as a writer. I mean, even a writer, like, dude, like the thought, I can't even wrap my brain around like the thought process of a writer.
Yeah.
Right. Like a lot of mine just kind of like gets thrown out, and then the miracle of editing puts it in really good perspective. So I feel like we have this, when you have a voice, you have a responsibility to use it. And whether you reap the benefits of that, of it being positive or negative, is, you know, is really a, oh, I don't have the word for it. It's like escaping me. But yeah, I think you just have an immense responsibility when you have a voice to use it.
Yeah.
And use it for good, because there's too many people out there using it for the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So, and everybody has a phone, and they're all on social media.
Right.
And we've all heard the term keyboard warriors. So if you've got the backbone to speak up and do something positive with it, like, I absolutely say do it. So I love what you're doing. I love your show. I think it's really great.
Thanks, man. Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing stuff that, you know, I know you talk about this stuff all the time, but yeah, I've felt a little bit less alone, you know, hearing your stories and hearing some of the pain that you've overcome, and some of the, man, just the battlefields you've been in.
Yep.
You know, it's really cool. And so yeah, I appreciate you. And yeah, go check out Logan's podcast, Dad Bods and Beards.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll put your social media and all your stuff in the show notes if you guys want to check it out. They I don't know your buddy Tyson as well, but you guys kind of do a lot of stuff together, and so yeah, check out their YouTube. You guys are pretty big on YouTube, right? Didn't you kind of get bigger on YouTube first?
So mine was originally TikTok.
Okay.
And then kind of into Instagram. And Tyson's profiles are more of the business side. That we have a beard care and men's grooming company that we do a lot with, which quick plug for that one is his when he created it, his company slogan is "Be proud of who you are."
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. Like, it's not you know, like, oh, if you're not a man, if you don't grow a beard like this, it's rock what you got and be proud of who you are. And so that's why I align so well with him. And, you know, so that's where you'll see any kind of collaborations between, you know, me and him with the Dad Bods and Beard stuff. And that's why we decided to start that, is because kind of wrote people in with, like, you know, he's a former bodybuilder and a small business owner, and he also works as a civilian contractor for the Air Force.
Right.
I work in excavation construction. I drive a Ford F-350 and tow massive machines all day. And, you know, but at the same time, these, you know, we both have kids and wives and families. We can come together and be like, how you doing, man?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to, I appreciate, you know, talking about that, because we just want people to understand, and guys to understand, like, it's a massive show of strength.
Yeah.
To recognize weaknesses and work on them.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. This was episode 82. Please, you know, subscribe, listen, share, whatever you want to do. We'll catch you next week.